Hello, welcome everyone to the breakout sessions for my Mustang mapping logosynthesis with animals session. Well, the focus obviously is on horses, but I try to mention other animals too. But I mainly worked with my horse, so this is the reason why the main story is about horses. But I'm grateful for any input or comment or idea you might have about other animals too. So let's start. A brief overview over the agenda for today or this breakout session. First, I'm going to introduce myself and my horse, like briefly. And then I will tell you about what I did or how I worked with logosynthesis with my horse. Like I'm going to present two different issues and the solutions. Then I will say something about what kind of issues you can address with your animal and which are maybe not so good to work on. I am going to say something about which protocols you can use while working with logosynthesis and what the benefits are using logosynthesis with animals. I guess we will have some time for Q&A, and then for this is just for the recording. There's a bonus issue. If you want to join until the end and listen to that, you are more than welcome. So let's start with the introduction. So I played a bit with being image creator. So this is obviously not me and Merlin. But yeah, I like to try some different things. So about myself, I've been a coach for more than 10 years now, and I worked with logosynthesis, like for my personal growth and development, as well as with clients since 2014. And I have a son and two cats, obviously a horse, and I live in Switzerland in winter tour. And my horse, Merlin is his name. He's a Mustang. He's approximately 12 years old. We don't know for sure. And he came all the way from Nevada to Switzerland in 2022. He was born and raised in the wild and rounded up in 2020. So his whole world turned upside down when he came to Switzerland. So why did I come up with the topic using logosynthesis with my horse? As I mentioned, I have been using logosynthesis as with humans for many years now for my personal growth. And when Merlin came to Switzerland, he was very traumatized. He wouldn't anyone let him touch him and was frightened about everything and everyone. And he reacted extremely to energy levels of me. So I had a great trainer in the beginning telling me I should try to send my energy backwards when approaching him forward, so that he wouldn't feel overwhelmed from my energy. So that was the first second I got the idea of if this is about energy, maybe logosynthesis will work too. And another trainer told me that basically working with horses is all about energy. And he mentioned something like my energy bubble, so my personal space around me, which we use in logosynthesis too. If I increase my energy from my energy bubble, I can maybe bump into the energy bubble of the horse and get him to move or stop if I reduce my energy bubble. So all of these horse people talking about energy, and so the idea was born to also try working with logosynthesis with Merlin. Because I also needed something to convince him that I am not the predator that is going to eat him. Like his instincts were very high on alert as being a white horse for most of his life. And he really tried to make sure that he will survive these given and strange situation. And he didn't really know humans or had bad experiences with them. So yeah, me being predator and him being prey made it specifically difficult. So yeah, I thought I'd give it a try. So the first issue I wanted to work on with Merlin was his, as mentioned before, immense anxiety. It was not only when it came to touching him, but in general. And as I said, I assume that he experienced a lot of former abuse from humans. While touching his nose at some point, after a few weeks, by the way, became possible, and at some point even touching or stroking his left shoulder worked. He wouldn't let anyone near the right side of his body, and I didn't even need to step into that direction. Just a small shift of my weight or focusing my energy and thinking about that I wanted to like try to get on his right hand side would cause him to step into that direction or quickly turn around so that I wouldn't have any chance to see or touch his right hand side. So he would do anything to protect the right side. Oh, by the way, if you find a mistake in that picture, yeah, you might want to write it in the comments. So my first attempt to try logosynthesis with Merlin, I used mapping. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it is a kind of a family constellation work, what we call it mapping. And you don't work with other people and or deputies, putting them into positions, but you use a paper or a card, which you call floor anchors. And then you can put them on the floor and mark the space for me or other persons, or in that case for me and Merlin. So in my case, I chose a card that should represent Merlin, and I chose a card that should represent me. And then I walked around in my room, in my space, to find the perfect space in the here and now where I would be and then where Merlin would be. So I placed both of us in the room. And in the beginning, I stood in my place and felt a bit of sadness that Merlin was so afraid of me. And additionally, some guilt for being responsible, that he had to leave his home and had to come to Switzerland and leave his whole world and everything behind. So after that, I stepped onto Merlin's place, and I immediately felt as if someone had shot me into my right side. Not literally shot me, but it felt like that. And I couldn't even really stand up straight, and the pain was really tough. So the level of distress was pretty high, 9 or 10, as I recall it. So I used the Logosynthesis basic protocol and set the sentences for the perception of that shot in my right side. And especially after the second sentence, that caused many emotional reactions, like releasing the non-me energy. I really had to move my body and jump up and down and stuff to let this non-me energy go. So, and after these first round of sentences, I was able to stand upright, but I saw a scheme of a figure or a man somewhere in the distance to my right, and this person or figure seemed to carry a whip or something with which he would be able to hit me. So me being Merlin still, because I still stood in his spot. So again, I used the sentences, the basic protocol, and set the sentences for the perception of the image, or the image of that figure. And And after this second round of sentences, I was able to like really relax, and it felt good, and there was no perception of stress in my body anymore. So like I, as Dörte, stepped away from Merlin's space and checked on my space, like Dörte's spot. And I also felt pretty good at that point and no stress anymore. So the day after this mapping, Merlin went to a trainer for 3 months. And there he never had an issue with touching his right hand side. When he came back to me, he still was a bit anxious, but never again to that extent as before. And now it's like, I don't know, half a year later, there's no difference between the both sides anymore. So that went pretty well. So issue number 2 was something that I thought is also caused by anxiety, but it turned out to be slightly different. So we had problems putting the halter on this horse for months and months and months. And I worked and worked and worked getting him to get used to this halter and stuff. But he would walk away and turn around, and yeah. So after I received some feedback about my timing from a trainer, I changed some small things, and after 3 weeks, I was able, like after 6 months, to finally put the halter on that horse, and that was the best feeling of success ever. But while repeating that every like day or so, like over 2-3 weeks, Merlin again started to turn around as soon as I wanted to put the halter on or walk away, or I don't know. So I tried again to use logosynthesis about this anxiety. And I did a mapping again. And so the process was the same. I chose a card or floor anchor for me, and I chose a floor anchor for Merlin and put them into the space like the here and now. And I stepped onto my place in the here and now at first. And I felt like some kind of shame that I wasn't able to kind of convince him that I'm not going to harm him. And I felt guilt that I put this pressure on him. And then I felt also a bit of anger that he wouldn't trust me, and sadness. So yeah, that was my situation at that point. So then I stepped onto Merlin's space, and I saw kind of Dörte coming with the halter, and that felt her hand on my throat, because like there's a small excurse, like I put the halter on like in a way where I had to hug him around his neck, so having the halter in one hand, and then you need to put the hands around the horse's head to change halter from one hand to the other, and then pull it around the neck and then upwards to the head. So in order to do that, I need to put one hand on his neck first and stroke him, and the other one like along his throat. And I used to kind of stroke him below the throat. So being in this mapping again and in Merlin's space, feeling this hand of Dörte on my throat, I really felt pure disgust. He really like kind of, horses are not able to vomit like physiologically, but I really felt like disgusting, like really, really horrible. So again, I used the basic protocol and set the sentences for the perception of Dörte's hand stroking my throat. And the distress and nausea really went down from 8 to 0 after applying the sentences. So obviously I was really curious of how the haltering would work after that logosynthesis mapping, because the day before I hadn't been able to put the halter on this horse. So after an hour or so, I went to Merlin and I took the halter, and it was as if we had never any issues before. Like I just put the halter on and he stood completely still and did so ever since. So we didn't have any problems so far anymore. So that was great. Okay, those were my two examples of using logosynthesis, and now we are going back to more not Merlin related issues, but general topics about logosynthesis with animals. So I put together some thoughts about what issues you can work on with animals, and your ideas are welcome too, of course. So in my opinion, you can work with animals on every behavior that is caused by an emotion, traumatic experience, or pain, or whatever. So, or not every behavior that is caused by an emotion, but like every emotion. So for horses, it might be, for example, trailer loading, issues with other horses in the herd, anxiety to leave the barn alone, and endless other stuff. So basically, you can work with anything that your animal is suffering from, or the horse in that case. Anxiety, grief, sadness, anger, shame, apathy. Like with dogs, you can, for example, work on aggression towards other dogs or humans. Also with dogs being aggressive sometimes. Oh, I mean, like dogs being aggressive sometimes hide fears that are below the aggressiveness. So maybe you can work also on that. Fear to be left home alone or at the store, or when you got your dog from shelter, or else working on past bad experiences, also something you can do with dogs. And with cats, you might be working on anxiety, being withdrawn. You can work on not using the toilet properly. You can work on aggression towards other cats or even humans. Sometimes my tomcat likes to bite when he's overwhelmed. So I've never worked on that, but maybe I try next thing. So these are just common examples. There might be endless other stuff you can work on. But don't forget, especially like when it comes to dogs and horses, like animals you train and have expectation towards too, like don't forget to also work on your side of your team, because your expectations and your emotions have a huge impact on your animal's feeling. Like especially horses, they sense your anxiety, they sense your anger, they sense whatever emotion you have. So in order for you to be relaxed, so that your animal can be relaxed, you need to work on your issues too. And then there's something else that I believe, that when it comes to emotions, we can work with our animals that like the emotions are a bit more basic and more linked to survival instinct and basic needs than we would experience in working with humans. Like because we do interpretations about the world and draw more specific conclusions and create a belief system. And a dog that, for example, often gets hit by its owner will also quickly learn to be afraid of the owner. But I'm not sure if, I guess it won't do the interpretations in terms of that guy is a mean person and he hits me because I'm a failure. And if I'd be a better boy, he won't hit me again. So the dog just tries to hide and survive and avoid the person because past experience showed that it hurts when being with that person. So, and then there are some issues I think you can't address with your animal. So animals live in the here and now. They don't plan ahead and they don't think what will happen in the future or tomorrow. They just react based on the given situation in that exact moment, as well as based on past experiences, being bad or good. But what you can work on, if you are afraid that a horse, for example, won't step on the trailer tomorrow, or the dog won't listen to you when meeting other dogs and attacking them, or whatever the scenario is, you can work on your fear and fantasy about the future outcome. And then if you react differently or more relaxed and without expectation, then it will have a huge effect also, like in terms of future topics. And the second thing that is difficult to work on is anything that is connected or related to instinct reactions. So it's just not possible to prevent or influence instinct reactions. You can't tell a cat to stop hunting mice or a horse to stop running away when they spook. And the reason for this lies in different brain structures animals have that distinguishes Homo sapiens from other animals or mammals. Like following images show an example for a horse. Again, I'm sorry. So sometimes a horse spooks for no reason and runs away. Like the being no reason is the human opinion. And that is its instinct telling him to do like whatever it takes to survive. And it might have seen something that scared it, and you can't tell them to stop and think before running because its brain is just not able to do that. Let me show you. Like this is the human brain. And if we see something with our eyes, the information is then transported to the visual cortex and from there to the prefrontal cortex. And then we think about what the perfect reaction might be in this given situation and what past experiences might help us to decide. And then if we finally do decide, then the prefrontal cortex sends information to motor cortex, and this area of the brain then tells our muscles to whatever movement we want to do then. And with the horse brain, it's slightly different because if the horse sees something, the information is then also transported to the visual cortex, but then from there directly to the motor cortex. So this is way faster, and there's no prefrontal cortex in the horse's brain that gives him the chance to think about something. It's just seeing something and then directly reacting. And that totally makes sense to survive, because during the period of time the analysis took us to decide whether or not we want to move, the lion would have already jumped onto the horse's throat. So yeah, it's just see a lion and run. So cats and dogs do have a prefrontal cortex, but it's smaller than ours. But they still are able to solve problems and have practically identical sections of the brain like we do. So cats and dogs also seem to think in same pattern as humans, partly owing to the similarity of neurotransmitters, which are used in conveying data. So yeah, they seem to be reacting a bit more like we do, but a horse has no prefrontal cortex and they just see the lion and run because they can't do otherwise, and you can't bring him to think before they run because they have no prefrontal cortex. Okay, so what protocols, logosynthesis protocols, can you use with animals? So for different issues in the human world, there are different approaches to work with them. In logosynthesis, we call them protocols. There are many, many protocols, and not all of them are good to use with animals, but some. Like the basic protocol is, I guess, the thing you all know. You identify the trigger by asking meta questions like how do you suffer and what makes you suffer, and you define a level of distress from 0 to 10, and then you apply the 3 logosynthesis sentences to the trigger that makes you suffer. You can use the basic protocol for anything, but as animals can talk, it is best to use it for your expectations or reactions towards your animal. This way you also have a great opportunity to reduce your own stress level in your connection to your animal and your energy system. And you either can do it as a self-coaching way or find support from a logosynthesis practitioner. And then there's the mapping. As animals can talk, you need to find a way to work with them so you get the information you need to apply the sentences. Like in logosynthesis, we use the mapping as a way to step into an energy field of another being or soul. So if you want to work with your animal about a certain problem, you can either work for yourself as a practitioner or you find support from a practitioner to do the mapping with you. In this work, you can identify the issue, and then normally you put cards or anchors again on the floor, like for yourself and for your animal. And maybe one for the issue, but that depends on the issue. And when stepping onto your animal's anchor, you will receive all the information that is available in this being's energy field. And then you can work with that using different protocols, whatever makes most sense. The basic procedure is also very useful with the mapping in combination for nearly everything that shows up. And then I wanted to say something about the PEARLS protocol. This is something you can use with body issues, pain, sickness. You can talk to organs or body parts directly. And given that the time is nearly running up, I'm trying to be as quick as possible now. So one thing that is really important to maybe also use is the OBO protocol. So OBO means on behalf of. So you basically use it if the client is in a state where he or she is not able to say the sentences on his own anymore. So you can say them for him or her. So as animals can't speak, I used it with my horse too, and this is the bonus issue I'm going to talk to you about. So you can use it for a very scary or stressful moment in the present. And I think it's perfect when you, like, whenever you are in a situation that is becoming too scary or too dangerous or too stressful, and you know why your horse or dog or cat is so scared, then you can say the sentences on behalf of your animal. So you use the basic protocol, identify the trigger, and before saying the first logosynthesis sentence, you add, I say the sentence on behalf of, and then the name of the animal. And after that, you say the logosynthesis sentence and then repeat that with all 3 sentences. But you need to be sure that you know what the exact trigger is, because the trigger is always something that your horse or yourself like either sees or hears or feels or smells or tastes. So all the triggers need to be VARCOG. But an animal has different competences to when it comes to their 5 senses. For example, horses and dogs and cats can smell way better than humans do, and because they have way more receptors in their noses. And they hear better than us and have different visual capabilities, perfectly adapted to their ecological niche. And these pictures on the next slide highlight the issue. So this is just one example of how different we and animals perceive the world around us. So if a horse spooks, it might be sure it is due to the wheelbarrow ahead, or no, sorry, I might be sure, like like in this example, the white area is the area I am able to see when sitting on my horse. So if this horse spooks that I'm sitting on, I might be sure it's due to the wheelbarrow ahead of us that hasn't been there yesterday. When the reason it really spooks is due to the bicycle behind us that comes there that I didn't see or hear, but the horse did. So if you want to use the OBO protocol, make sure that you exactly know what the stress right now, like what triggers the stress right now and your email suffers from in the current situation. If you're not sure, do a more broader approach when using the logosynthesis and saying like, I retrieve all energy that is bound up in the perception of my surrounding or in the current situation or something like that. So the last slide. The benefits of logosynthesis for animals, in my opinion. When using logosynthesis with animals is going to reduce the stress levels, both of animal and owner, and it heals traumatic memories or body issues. It helps gaining self-confidence, again, both for animal and owner, and in that way also improve the safety, especially when working with horses or dogs. It increases your understanding for your animal and maybe also vice versa. And it strengthens the bond between you and deepens the relationship you have. This is what I experienced so far. And then there was a question in terms of the OBO protocol, if I have to say the sentences out loud. Yes, you do. If you say the sentences on behalf of an animal or a human, you always need to be loud and say the sentences so that the other soul can hear that. And even if you do a mapping and you work with your floor anchors, you always need to say the sentences out loud. This was, sorry, I forgot to switch to the slide of the questions. So for more information, there are many books to read, and I, especially for this presentation, also read the Horse Brain, Human Brain book, where the pictures are from. There are websites that you find information about logosynthesis, and then I have an Instagram account for Merlin. This is Merlin the Magic Mustang. And there's also a Facebook page for Dörte Möller coaching, where we can also get in touch. Thank you for listening and your participation. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the logosynthesis day. So, and as a bonus track, I'm going to tell you about issue number 3. Oh my God, issue number 3. If you still want to listen. So, to be honest, I never really thought. Oh well, sorry. Issue number 3 is the third thing I worked with Merlin in terms of logosynthesis. So, no, again, to be honest, I never really thought about grief when it comes to animals. I mean, I was aware that they can grieve, and I knew that if they lose a lifelong companion, they would grieve, but I didn't think about the extent as to which it can go. But then with Merlin, I sensed a lot of sadness when being around him, and I was not the only one. I mean, I had at least 3 people telling me that he is so sad, and they sense the sadness too, and he looks so sad and stuff. And I still didn't think about using logosynthesis with that, but then it kind of jumped into my face at some point. Because I had an animal communicator visiting Merlin, and she was one of these three people telling me that he's so sad. And she told me that he wanted to be seen, like he felt like he came to Switzerland and just had to be or function as if he were a domestic horse. But no one ever took the time, like me, I never took the time to just be with him and getting to know him without expectations. And no one would ever acknowledge the fact that he is different than other horses, like being the wild horse. And he really knew that he was different and kind of talked in a different language than the domestic horses. So the animal communicator told me to just stop kind of working with him and having expectations, but just be in with him and open the heart chakra and let him know that I see him and appreciate him and stuff. So I did that. Sorry. And one day I just sat there next to him, telling him that I appreciate him and I see him that he's different and a wild horse and that he's brave and strong and clever. And I repeated that like constantly. And then I told him, please show me your world. And it was like, bam, if he just had, as if he had just had waited for me to ask that question. And I instantly, I got a picture kind of beamed into my head of a desert with single grass heaps and some painted brown and white horse in the background. And with this picture came immense emotion of sadness and grief. I was like super overwhelmed and instantly started crying like rivers. Oh my God, that was horrible. And then in my head, I asked him, like, is this your mother? And the answer was totally clear now that it was his wife. I still get emotional. Um, this huge amount of grief and pain, like it was not only missing his wife, he also missed his home. He was super homesick. He was beyond sad. So in order to relieve this pain a bit, I spontaneously decided to use logosynthesis. And as I was in this present moment next to him, and he could hear what I would be saying, I used the OBO protocol. At first, I said the sentence, I say the sentence on behalf of Merlin, and then I used the basic logosynthesis sentences for the image of home and the mare in the background. And after the first round of this 3 sentences, the worst pain was gone. Not completely though, but instead of this previous picture, I got the next one of the situation of Merlin when he first got rounded up. So just for your explanation, he wasn't rounded up by helicopter, luckily, but they used a water trap. I learned that information later. So basically, they put water in the desert and put a fence around it, and when the horses stepped to the water, they closed the fence. So the picture I got was Merlin behind the fence, and at that point, I didn't know that he was in the fence. I mean, of course he was at some point, but I didn't know the scenario. So the picture I got was he was behind a fence together with the other horses of his herd, and he felt like a failure. Such a failure, because he thought that if only he had done more and fought against this fence and the humans, he could have escaped and maybe saved his family. But he didn't do it. He kind of was like a coward, he thinks. So he felt a huge amount of shame for being such a loser. And yeah, wow. So I repeated the sentences with the OBO protocol and said it on behalf of Merlin. The sentences for the belief that I could have done more. And after that, like I knew or I felt that he felt relieved, and that topic never was an issue again. And like fun fact, by the way, Merlin is from Nevada, and I have never been there, so I had no idea how it kind of looked like there. So I checked afterwards on the internet and Googled it, and like the desert, the pictures I saw exactly the same that Merlin showed in my head, and yeah, that was extremely interesting. So at some point I repeated the work with the grief like half a year later, because I still felt a bit of sadness and was still a huge amount of grief around, missing his family and his home. And in the mapping, I again used the basic protocol and still further relief, but I don't think that, I don't know, it will ever cure. I'm not sure. So thank you for listening. Enjoy your time with your animal, and maybe at some point, if you like, we can discuss or find each other on Facebook or yeah. Thank you. Bye.